Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first online session of the DeFord Lecture Series. My name is Elizabeth Catlos, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Geological Sciences at the University of Texas at Austin. We're part of the Jackson School of Geosciences, and the DeFord Lecture Series is our departmental seminar series. It's been a requirement and a tradition for all graduate students since the late 1940s. The lecture series is named after Professor Ronald DeFord, who joined the university as a professor in 1948 with the purpose of enhancing the quality of the graduate program in our department. Our lecture series is supported by a range of endowments, and today's speaker is the Robert H. Kyler Endowed Lecture. This lecture series was established in 2008 with a gift from the estate of Benjamin Moore Anderson. Ben wanted to honor the life of his friend and mentor, Captain Robert Hamilton Kyler. Kyler was born in Austin, Texas in 1908 and was an associate professor of geology at UT Austin for 17 years. His untimely death while serving his country on a training mission with the Army Air Corps in 1944 was a staggering blow to his friends and family, the science of geology, and specifically micropaleontology and subsurface geology. Ben Anderson earned a degree in geology from UT Austin in 1939, where he was a member of Sigma Chi fraternity. He also spent a year studying aeronautical engineering at the Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Institute in California. In 1945, he founded Anderson Greenwood and Company to design and build aircraft, which became a world leader in precision valve technology. Ben Anderson passed away in 2007 at the age of 91. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question and A box in your Zoom control panel. The chat's been disabled, but Q&A is available throughout the presentation, and you can upvote particular questions that you believe should be addressed. And we'll bring them up after the talk. Also, the recording of this talk will be posted on the DeFord website, and we'd like to encourage you to share it with your social networks. Our speaker today will be formally introduced by Dr. Samuel Moore, who is Director of Outreach and Diversity at the Jackson School of Geosciences.
Thank you, Liz. It's my honor to introduce you to Dr. Lisa White, who currently is the Director of Education and Outreach at the Museum of Paleontology at UC Berkeley. Her past positions include Professor of Geosciences at San Francisco State University, where she also served as the Geosciences Department Chair and Associate Dean of the College of Science and Engineering. And the graduate division at San Francisco State. She's a micropaleontologist by training, an International Ocean Discovery Program shipboard scientist, and IODP School of Rock instructor with extensive experience directing ship and shore-based research experiences for underrepresented students. She's also a fellow of the California Academy of Sciences, a fellow of the Geological Society of America, and she's currently the chair of the AGU Diversity and Inclusion and Advisory Committee. Many of you know Lisa as being the inaugural recipient of the GSA Bromley Award, an honor bestowed upon a geoscientist who has been instrumental in opening the geoscience field to other minorities. That certainly describes the work that Lisa has done throughout her career while being a great scientist and establishing her work at San Francisco State and then going to the UC Museum to continue her outreach. Ladies and gentlemen, and others, Lisa, Dr. Lisa White.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm welcome and for inviting me to give the first seminar of the semester and give it virtually, of course. And it seems fitting because my last geoscience meeting in person was at the Jackson School. So it was in early March. Professor Sharon Mosier, who continues to guide a group of us working on a vision and change document, re-examining the undergraduate degree requirements for the 21st century. We had just finished meeting at the Jackson School, and who knew, a week or two later, we would all be shut down and working remotely. So it's such a pleasure to be able to reconnect with all of you. And I'm very passionate about the topic that I'll highlight during my talk, just ways that we can use my discipline in geoscience, paleontology, to really engage underrepresented communities, and what are some things we're doing at the Museum of Paleontology at UC Berkeley, even while working in the virtual space that we are now, to ensure that we're connecting with a variety of groups. So I'll highlight some of these programs during the talk. You can see from some of the icons there, programs that I'll talk about. So excited to share those with you. And to give you an idea of what I intend to cover in this seminar, I find myself, given all the years that I've been working in this profession, the years I was a professor at San Francisco State and now in a broader education and outreach role at a Museum of Paleontology, there are definitely some guiding frameworks that I follow as I think about shaping geoscience programs with particular groups in mind. And I've been a fan of what my friend and colleague Brandon Jones at the National Science Foundation calls JEDI. So I'll explain that, the justice in equity, diversity, inclusion that I think does make a difference when we're preparing students for careers that we hope they're as excited about as we are. And given the times that we live in and the extra attention that we're paying to the role of diversity and our responsibility as leaders in science for broadening who participates, I think we should think very carefully about using moments as the times that we live in now to really try to change the structure of our field and make it more into a movement rather than a moment. And excited to share with you what I think the role of museums are as we share information and build awareness, the unique opportunities that we have to broaden engagement, and the role of museums in professional preparation. And so in my case, a lot of that involves really working with graduate students who are really eager to expand their ability to be broader educators and very versed in pedagogies that are more inclusive. And as I share with you some of the program examples from the Museum of Paleontology, we've really reinvested in our web resources and tried to make them more interactive so that students, educators, professionals can improve the way that they communicate about science by looking at some of these new interactive tools that we have. And given the way that we all need to work now, we have fully embraced the idea and the need to offer field experiences that are virtual. I certainly do miss the field still, as I'm sure many of you do too, but it has forced us to be a lot more creative and more broad in our thinking, especially if we want to attract communities that are underrepresented in science. So I'll highlight those. And we've also at the museum moved into a really different arena for us. And so I'm excited to share with you this new pop-up exhibit that we're planning. So when we are able to reconvene in person at our museum, we're designing an escape room style game that's about the evolution of, go figure, a viral outbreak. But we thought of that idea even before COVID. That was our idea for this escape room game. So I'll chat a little bit about that. And when we are able to return to the field, I'm very active in projects with IODP, the International Ocean Discovery Program, and partner programs that get students out on research vessels for experiences. And I've been really excited in the last year or so about some community college partnerships that we've developed in the Bay Area, largely through the drive and leadership of graduate students in the UCMP community. And that's really opened some additional doors to ways that we might broaden participation, which has also led me and collaborators to just rethink how we're doing leadership training when it comes to diversity and ways that we might expand and change those efforts. So when thinking about the justice and equity, diversity, and inclusion, and as we think about resources, as we develop programs, as we enter into new collaborations and partnerships, I would argue, and others do, that it's not enough to simply, allocate resources to ensure that everyone has access. We certainly want to embrace all our differences, and in the spirit of diversity, we want to be sure there aren't barriers to full participation that leads to opportunities for full inclusion. But I often feel that within this broad discussion of equity, diversity, and inclusion, we leave out what it really means to have the full kind of participation that's really only comes about when you're addressing justice, when you're dismantling barriers, where you're considering some of the structural frameworks that have been so limiting to other communities. And so in this thinking and framework and sort of philosophy of geoscience and JEDI, which by the way, we've sort of captured this from another industry, and you can go to this JEDI collaborative site. But if we're thinking about what it really means to share our field in a way that makes people want to know more about it, fully engage, stick with the discipline, transfer the knowledge to others, then it's helpful to continue to examine, what are we doing? What are we sharing when we develop programs intended for diverse students? Are we just sharing information? Are we just giving them that initial opportunity for knowledge or engagement? Or are we building the kind of base for knowledge, giving individuals opportunities to connect the dots, to see themselves in this discipline and feel just sort of feel invested enough in the discipline with their knowledge to want to share it with others. And so this sort of true engagement that thinks of the whole scope of involvement driven by JEDI, I think it requires this knowledge. I find myself too reflecting on a National Academy of Sciences working group that I was on, the lead author on this paper, Art Goldstein, where we put together what we might typically call the preparation pyramid in geoscience. So, if you look at the base of the pyramid, we can argue here that sort of entry into geoscience or really in any STEM field is about awareness, right? So, museums are important here, informal science, the K-8 curricula, community engagement, after school clubs. It's this, freedom to learn in that informal science setting. And there can be a lot of those kinds of programs. And if someone's interested, if I, have an urban youth that's totally excited about fossils and geoscience from a program that they may have been involved with, then we want to be sure they go to that next level of engagement here. So looking at high school curriculum, introductory courses, we know that there many challenges remain with the lack of earth science instruction at the high school level, the lack of advanced placement classes in geoscience. Sometimes it's not offered as a lab class that's required for college. So there are some of the initial barriers, right? And getting someone from that initial path of awareness and engagement to a level where they can professionally prepare for the geoscience discipline. And so in professional preparation, again, you can sort of come into these parts of the pyramid, at any level. And although this appears very linear and appears that, the structure only goes one way, we know that some people don't have a first geoscience class until high school or college, which was my case in college. But the point in a diagram like this is that, there are lots of opportunities for engagement at the early informal levels. And then as we professionally prepare, there are higher expectations, but the opportunities are narrower. And so, of course, at the top of this pyramid, where a lot of us professional geoscientists are, faculty and directors and scientists. There are fewer of us than, of course, there are at the early stages. And one challenge with this is we tend to measure progress in a field by how many people are at the top here, with their PhDs, in their leadership roles. And while there's plenty of value in that, after all, we do drive trends in the field. We really dictate, those of us in these high leadership positions, what directions the field goes in. But I'd argue that we miss some opportunities to measure progress if we don't look at all the terrific things many of us are working hard to do to get folks introduced, get young people introduced to our discipline, even if maybe they don't end up getting a PhD, but they build skills and levels of training that might prepare them for other kinds of jobs. And my connection with the Jackson School is in multiple dimensions, and I had the great honor to be part of a steering committee, an organizing committee that held a number of summits on improving undergraduate geoscience education, so led by Professor Sharon Mosier, who was then dean. And we're still working through our final document on what do we expect students, professionals to acquire in their training, as they make their way through that pyramid. What does that look like in the 21st century to acquire the level of training that we would expect for a modern geoscientist? So certainly systems thinking, problem solving. How often do we want our students to work with real data, right? Just understanding how science works, the nature and process of science, critical thinking, geological reasoning and synthesis skills, the problem solving and being able to visualize data in multiple dimensions, the concept of time that's so unique and important in geoscience, and looking at it on a whole range of time skills. And really one of my favorite in all this is just being able to communicate, right? I mean, look at the times that we live in where we are forced to communicate in, short, quick ways, through social media, but it's also a pillar of our success to be able to write effectively, speak well, share with enthusiasm what it is that you like. So when you set up these kinds of conditions for what we expect you to achieve to be successful, then it can be a long road. And I wanted to share a little bit about my background. I'm really a radical, you probably wouldn't know it by, my nice demeanor, but sharing a little bit of family history helps just me better define, why I'm so committed to this work. So my father was a professor at San Francisco State University. San Francisco's my hometown. My parents actually met at San Francisco State in the 50s. And then my sister and I were undergrads at SF State many years later. And when this photograph was taken for this book cover, Kendi is a modern author, of course. This is a photo from the 60s. And when that photo was shot, my father was Dean of Undergraduate Studies at San Francisco State University. And during the strike year at San Francisco State, so during 1968-69, the whole university went on strike, mostly forced by the Black students at that time. They'd had it. There was no curriculum that reflected their experience. They demanded a Black Studies department, a College of Ethnic Studies. And my late father, here's the cover of one of his books on the lower left, he helped really define the field of Black psychology. In 1970, he published an article called Towards a Black Psychology. And so it's recognized as the first article that makes a valid argument for not defining the Black community or communities of color by the same lens that traditionally in psychology, was very white framing. And so, so his work and the sort of legacy of speaking truth to power, challenging academic institutions to have programs that reflect the student body. And, you know, as we consider just the times that we live in, where it's easy to be distracted and, you know, want to do something right away, and, you know, we're all motivated to make change, but then we get back to work, right? And many of us can't get back. I mean, it is my work, you know, and it's what I do. But we need our allies and partnerships to recognize that this can't just be a fleeting moment. You know, we want to make this a continual movement for change. So with, you know, my academic genes, and found myself also a faculty member at San Francisco State after I finished my degree at UC Santa Cruz. So all the 22 years I was on the faculty there, my research specialty is micropaleontology, diatom microfossils, and paleoceanography. And while I was still research active with work on the Monterey Formation in California, and work with the Ocean Discovery program, I had many administrative roles at San Francisco State, and really was motivated to make a difference in my hometown. And so one of my first large NSF grants started a program called SF Rocks. I like to think of it as a mini geoforest, and that's not even probably the right description. It's about 1/10 the size of geoforest, but it was an opportunity to get urban youth out to geological areas. So in the days when we can do this kind of classic geological field trips, you know, it served as a real inspirational way to introduce urban kids to geoscience in settings that we love, right? So reaching out to communities and kids with science in San Francisco, the program morphed with additional NSF support to joint programs with UTEP, with University of New Orleans, and also Purdue University. And so we join forces and bring students out. But I title this slide, Is That Landscape Real? Because this happened on an actual field trip with the big group with University of New Orleans, UT El Paso, and Purdue, where, you know, we spent weeks planning, months planning this trip. We're all going. So that year we were meeting the group in Utah. And so we're driving from California. I've got 15 high school students with me, faculty, graduate students, and we're meeting other faculty, high school students, graduate students. And so we make our first stop. And actually these are the Goblin areas of Utah. And so even though we had planned the high school students for what they were going to see, a student asked me when we got out of the car, "Is that real?" And I was taken aback. First I was upset. It's like, now I'm spending NSF money to get us all out here. This is supposed to be a great, like, diversity field trip. And you're asking me, is this real? Like, haven't you been listening? We've been preparing you for what geology looks like in the field. But then I had to stop myself because I thought, well, this student has never really seen landscapes like this. And they do look kind of crazy, unreal. So that's a valid question. And when we engage folks, students, groups who haven't had an opportunity to connect with earth science in the ways that we're all used to now, we have to be prepared for how they might react or see the landscape, because they're likely to see it different than us. So I wasn't deterred. Like, I'm in this for the long haul. And, you know, I came to geoscience a little late. I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted to be the Black female Ansel Adams all the way through my 3rd year of undergrad at San Francisco State. But somehow just started taking geology, mostly to learn more about the landscape so I can be a better photographer. And I just fell in love with the subject. And so I'm always sensitive to where students enter, you know, that training pyramid, and what we expect from them as they matriculate through the discipline. And so even through my San Francisco State professor years, I was connected with the Museum of Paleontology at UC Berkeley through a lot of the great online resources. And so this is one I'll talk more about from our Understanding Science website. And so this framework diagram, we call it How Science Works, is a terrific way, I think, to engage students with how science, you know, really works. And so again, if they're questioning if a landscape is real, or, is this a real science, then it's a great way to have them explore, what it means to collect data in science, test ideas, to explore and discover, and to form, communities of scientists and work that has lots of benefits and outcomes. So through the SF Rocks years and partner programs, we spent a lot of time in field instruction, classroom instruction, and giving students these additional skills. So it's not just a, one-time engagement, serves us better when we can ensure that they build the kinds of science skills that they have. So in these guiding frameworks, just, recognizing different ways of thinking about diversity and equity inclusion, that gives us that, JEDI force, and thinking about preparation. And I think having to be patient about this diversity movements over moments. We can get caught up in the moment. I mean, look this week, now we have another incident that is causing us to wonder, are we ever going to get it right when it comes to, how we treat and respect one another? And so what are we to do, as a group of scientists who are really trying to diversify a field that we have been told forever is the least diverse of all the STEM fields? So what are we doing, nationally and internationally within our professional societies to be sure that we model some of the better behavior that we'd like to see, and that we work together to create resources? So last year, I accepted the chairship of the new AGU Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. And so in this role, I've published a number of opinion pieces with the president of AGU, Robin Bell. So some of these I know, have very obvious titles. Okay, so yes, we know we need to be more diverse and inclusive, but why? Why should we ask people, underrepresented scholars who may know nothing about our discipline, to come and study it? What do we offer? What do we make them feel like they belong and that they can take charge of this discipline? So been just trying to write and think more about why diversity even matters to us as a discipline. What should we be sharing with students that would make them want to come and pursue this field? And what can we do as leaders to get better at just taking some steps forward? And I'm sure faculty at the Jackson School and elsewhere across campus and at universities nationwide have opportunities now for anti-racism training. Those of us in particular that do field work really think about bystander intervention, things that we do in the settings where we work that can create safer spaces, safe environments to work. And, some conversations are unpleasant, right? I mean, it's not easy to talk about race, but it's easier, I think, for us academics to just get to work. What can we be doing in our classrooms to introduce more inclusive pedagogy, to make sure that we're hearing and seeing the whole student, that we're creating classrooms that make it possible for everyone to learn, no matter where they come in this training pyramid. And more recently, and with all of the different petitions and supported statements that I know our universities have issued and that our professional societies have issued, I joined a group, the Geosciences of Color, to respond with a call for action. So I think all the statements are important, and we need to make sure that we're committed and focused on the need to make a change, but how do we make that change? And so, sharing opportunities to listen, act, and lead is a lot of what we try to transfer in terms of knowledge. So bring all that. So I'm really a radical in this plaid shirt. I'm committed to making sure that everyone has an opportunity. At San Francisco State, it's a very teaching center university, so there's wide opportunities to engage with a lot of community kinds of programs. So I'm trying to bring all that to a research museum now. So 8 years ago, when I accepted the opportunity to be the education outreach director at Berkeley, at the Museum of Paleontology, I was already a fan of all of the web resources. And even though we don't have a lot of public space for exhibits, so the T-Rex that you see there is in the lobby of the main building that we are in. And there's some exhibits around at the base there of the T-Rex, but not that many. The classic look at cow, the Campanile, our bell tower actually does house some of our collection. So the 5 million specimens we have were one of the largest museums associated with a public university anywhere in the country. And so in addition to all the specimens that we have from all over the world, we, especially in the education outreach group, we've really invested a lot of time and resources into our online resources, our websites, which get more than 1.5 million web page accesses a month. And we do, even though we don't have large public space for exhibits, we certainly do quite a number of things with Cal undergraduates when it comes to their experience with curation and cataloging, and of course with graduate students as well. So as I walk you through just some of our programs and what my philosophy has been as the education director at UCMP. So building on our main education and outreach arm, which is our websites, what can we be doing in that space to engage broader communities, to really increase the level of interactivity, support underrepresented scholars, and also support graduate students in training and JEDI leadership. So just returning for a minute to this preparation pyramid. So really just trying to, in this middle part of the diagram, consider just additional kinds of programs and projects that can draw more diverse audiences. And, it's one thing to graphically show where everybody should be progressing and what the linear pathway may be, but educational opportunities span, and they should, the whole of the levels of training, and we have to realize that where we might be investing resources and time and at that awareness level where it's easy on the public level to engage people, there still needs to be enough resources and preparation opportunities at that professional level up here so that we can, I think, really invest in the best kind of training that can be ready for, movements and trends that shift. So I'll spend the remainder of the talk just highlighting some of the different projects that I direct at the Museum of Paleontology with collaborating partners and what we've been able to achieve and what still remains a challenge, especially to recruiting more Black and Brown students to the museum, to paleontology and to earth science. So many of you may already be familiar with our Understanding Evolution site. So it's definitely a go-to site for information about biological evolution. And we like to think about it as a one-stop shop for information and resources. Initially, when the site launched, I was still at San Francisco State then in the early 2000s, but on the advisory board for this project. And so the intended audience really was teachers, mostly K through 12 teachers, but university audiences used the site really from the beginning and found just as effective for undergraduate instruction. And so over the years, there were more opportunities or more information for undergraduate audiences, and it remains very, very popular. And Understanding Science launched some years later. And the thinking with Understanding Science was sometimes the hang up. I mean, there are many reasons why teaching evolution can be a challenge, especially at the K through 12 level. But there are times when teaching an important concept in science is inhibited because there's not a deep enough understanding of really how science works, of the nature and process of science. So this website is fully committed to that. And like Understanding Evolution, there's a terrific range of resources. this interactive flow chart that really tries to make a case for overturning the static checklist of the scientific method, has been a really effective way to engage people around what science is, you know, who can be a scientist, what it is that we do with our work. And so this central diagram really makes the point that science is not linear, you know, it's iterative, and it depends on a whole range of skills. And there are these feedbacks that mean that sometimes you need to retest information, or after the initial exploration, there might be some reevaluation, and that's all very common. And what's been exciting about the reinvestment in our websites is now with the support of HHMI, there's an interactive version of that flowchart. And so users can download, or there's a web-based version where you basically can click on different parts of the framework, and you can add information. And so it's fully interactive. If you want to use this tool with your students, if they're reading a scientific paper, if they're examining a particular discovery in science that had, you know, some interesting twists and turns. So we use the in Cretaceous extinction hypothesis as a great way to highlight just how important it is to share that science and scientific discoveries take years, and you have stops and starts, and you have people that don't believe you, even though the data supports what you say. And so we've really been excited about using this tool. When I was doing more work actually in the field with students and teachers, we would use it. It works well on mobile devices. And so it's just a way of documenting, again, what is your science journey. And I'm excited, a different web asset, which will launch later this year, Understanding Global Change, is an opportunity to really examine the drivers and impacts of change and their effect on the Earth system. And this is available now through the Biointeractive page with HHMI, and then we'll have a full site launch in about a month. And so this click and drag and ability to drag icons that represent drivers and impacts of change, as well as the Earth system, we think is a really exciting tool that we and the project lead for this, Jessica Bean, are excited to share really with a range of audiences. So let me move to some collections-based projects. So we were fortunate, as some other museums too, and we've got a dozen museum partners in this, to receive a grant to digitize, you know, millions of invertebrate specimens from the West Coast. And so the broader impacts arm of this are a series of virtual field experiences. So I've been working with the Paleontological Research Institution with PRI on a series of virtual field experiences that make full use of gigapan, so high resolution photography. We use Esri, this story map. So this map journaling is a great tool for being able to do this. And so these story maps that the GIS folks, Esri, have available for free has been a great way to incorporate, you know, rich photographs, video, opportunities to really explore this area. And so we've got 2 VFEs up already that will be in this series of 4, but we primarily have been sharing this with K through 12 audiences. Our thinking here is, we know even in the good times, right? Not everybody can get in the field, certainly not K through 12 audiences. And in the case of the Central Valley of California, it's Kettleman Hills area, there are communities that we've been wanting to connect with, Latinx communities for years, a little bit better around the geology and paleontology of this particular area. So being able to share these resources, and then we have ones from the coast as well. And so in these story maps, there's really great ways to, you know, invite someone to experience the area. You can show beautiful photographs of the California coast. So this is Moss Beach. It's about 20 miles south of San Francisco. There's a strand of the San Andreas Fault, the Seal Cove or San Gregorio Fault that actually goes out to sea right here. And there's a really awesome fold there. But in this, again, it's a level of an engagement with field geology and paleontology collection sites that we hope gives users a chance to see what we see when we go in the field. And so there's all sorts of great ways to interact with this paleontological rich site, and then to learn more about the collections that are in our museum. And we try to capture ourselves in the field. So here, two of my colleagues there in the bottom screenshots that have joined me from PRI in this work. And so we just, talk people through the outcrop and show, again, what we see. And it's an opportunity to try to, share that enthusiasm for the places that we work, and share what the scientific value is of this. So I'll run through, we talked about UCMP websites, the interactive web resources, virtual field trips. So let me highlight this new direction for us, which is a pop-up exhibit where, again, when we're able to fully launch this, groups of, it can be families, it can be classrooms, so in groups of about 10 will fit in what will be a pop-up museum, so a pop-up structure designed to look like a field trailer. And so inside, the team would play a game. They'd be challenged to solve a biomedical mystery, but it's escape room style. So there'll be clues and puzzles that you have to solve, and you can't get out. Well, you can walk out if you want, but it's designed to be completed in about an hour. And so this will be fully bilingual, but inside, again, students, families, they'll have a chance to really think about what this virus is. They'll look at phylogenetic trees, they'll solve puzzle challenges to figure out the genome. And we really wanted to take understanding evolution on the road. So it was one way of extending the reach of our websites and doing something completely different. And Anna Thanukos, who's our chief science editor for Understanding Evolution, Understanding Science, she's a real escape room aficionado. So I said, okay, I guess this is a good idea. And we got our first NIH grant to fund this. So we're really excited about this work. And other projects that are really helping us connect with broader communities. And this one's really closer to my heart. So shipboard work, being able to work with the IODP. I also, through STEMCs, have a partnership with that program where we use vessels from the UNOS fleet, so the university fleet of research vessels that allows us to take students out. So we were on the Atlantis summer of last year. The Atlantis carries the Alvin, so that was super exciting for students. We didn't deploy the Alvin, but we got to get in it while it was on board. And we've taken teachers out, and we're able to show them what is a typical core flow, what we do when we're out. We're using UCMP online materials so that students can communicate more effectively. And so we're excited through this Ambassador for STEM training program to be able to unite with our ocean science partners to get students out and engaged in ocean science research, get excited about micropaleontology maybe. But it's just, again, one of the suite of programs that we're excited to bring to communities. And I think you can tell from the different programs that I've shared that we have programs for pre-college audiences, teachers, again, through the resources, the virtual field trips, definitely investing in the undergraduate communities. And then with these last two, I want to highlight some of what the investment is for community college student partnerships, our own graduate students that are leading this, and then some additional opportunities for faculty training. So Access, Advancing Community College Education for Student Success. So this is a graduate student-led effort which reaches out to about a dozen Bay Area community colleges. And so students and their instructors when we were able to do in-person tours, would come to the UCMP for an afternoon. And so we would have a designated lab. There'd be a range of themes in the lab, from evolution to vertebrate paleontology to fossilization, you name it. But what's been exciting and important for us in this work is, I mean, there's just no reason why a community college that's 5 miles from Berkeley, shouldn't have an opportunity to come to the museum, especially if they're taking a historical geology class with a paleo unit, or even a intro bio course that has an evolution unit. We want to provide that service. And so it's just been a great way to make this partnership. It was very grassroots. The initial seed funding was from the Paleo Society, but we find that the connection with the graduate students, the working directly with the community college instructors to make this, jive with their syllabus has been important. Having students come on the Berkeley campus, just giving them an aim and seeing that, high level academic achievement is attainable. The range of graduate students that we have assisting us, some come from underrepresented groups. And so we think it's just a great way to make that connection to students at our local community colleges that are often from Black and Latino communities. And now in the pandemic environment that we work in, we have transferred these labs to virtual form. And so we've got the complete labs as we would offer them during the museum visit, which would include a tour, but there would also be an actual, sit down 2-hour lab with specimens at the UCMP. And so now we've just transferred our specimens to the virtual. We make full use of the digital Atlas of Ancient Life and the paleobiology database to incorporate images. And so we just want to keep this going and also provide students with opportunities maybe to intern with us if they're really excited about paleo. And in my last couple minutes, just want to share some things we're doing with graduate students and early careers in mind, and with faculty who teach fieldwork in mind. And we've all been really forced to rethink and re-examine and consider why we offer fieldwork. Is it still essential for geoscience? There's such a special place of fieldwork and geoscience instruction. And with this particular project, so fieldwork, inspiring expanded leadership and diversity, was born out of the Gold Project at the NSF. And our focus here was really drawing attention to some of the barriers in fieldwork. And this was all pre-pandemic. I mean, this funding was from 3 years ago, and we were able to do a great in-person field retreat for field instructors, not only in geoscience, but also in field biology and oceanography. And now really, I think we're all paying more attention to some of the structural challenges with fieldwork as we've been forced to work remotely. And we know there are great suites of information now and field offerings that are remote, but I think we do need to continue to question where fieldwork lies in our training and what might be some barriers to full inclusion. And there were some great articles this summer, and there's a group of great scientists, field instructors, also scientists who work with accessibility challenges, like Chris Atchison at University of Cincinnati, who got a rapid NSF. And so they put a whole suite of great remote field experiences online. There were a couple of articles, student written, and students were the subject of interviews about accessibility in fieldwork, questioning, is it really time to change this, what can seem to be an outdated requirement? I mean, I personally love the field, but I'm also very inclusive and know that, it may not always be required or necessary for all work. So in the closing time, and just wanted to leave some time for questions, so I just encourage all of you that really do care about increasing JEDI and geoscience, that it just goes without saying, let's try to fix what's broken. You know, let's look at the places in those pathways, in our degree expectations, in the way that we first engage students with geoscience, whether it be paleontology or volcanology or seismology or natural hazards. You know, what are expectations, and are we making sure we're just not setting students up to fail? And so as we just continue to consider what we require in the preparation, and the stakes and the skill levels are high now. I mean, look at 21st century jobs require so much that can be a lot different from what I experienced when I did my training. So we want to always be mindful of where there may be hidden barriers, and what might we be doing better, again, to improve this professional preparation and the expectations that we have of students. And so this whole issue of making progress, and again, how are we measuring progress? Are we just looking at PhDs earned, which is one measure of success, but having some measure of success that is about evaluating this sort of real skill building in young people that we hope to draw and keep in this discipline. And however it is they decide to use their degree, maybe they'll be a teacher or a journalist, you know, or have their own YouTube channel where they're communicating science in unusual ways, or maybe they're working on an oil rig. But I think when we just have an opportunity, you know, to reevaluate how we're designing projects and who are we designing them for, and what really are our outcomes, and are we ready to accept that, you know, there could be a whole different looking student body who comes to understand and enjoy our field. And you know, the way degree programs are structured, it's easy to overlook potential in students. You just, you know, got to get through the class, however many students you have, just, you know, don't always have time for that kind of individualized attention. And so I've been at least inspired by some of the mentoring movements and strategies that look at the whole student, and what it means to transfer a sense of belonging in a STEM discipline, especially one like ours, which is unusual, has a lot of, you know, different kinds of quirks that, you know, are very much geoscience connected, that maybe we haven't always questioned, because those of us who are professional, I mean, we kind of like those traditions. So why change? But, you know, maybe it's time to change. And certainly these last two I'm most passionate about. I think there's a lot of great opportunity to continue to support graduate students who want to be more experienced in JEDI training, and see themselves as real advocates for this kind of, you know, diversity revolution that we hope starts to happen in our field. And if that means, you know, helping students who are underrepresented, you know, really overcome what maybe weren't barriers for us, but are for them, then, you know, I think we're all the better for it. So just want to thank all the individuals I'm fortunate to work with at the UCMP, and all our sources of support. And I hope I can continue with some new partnerships in this work. I've certainly valued the conversations that I've had today with members of the Jackson School, and of course in other visits I've had there. I'm always inspired by all the work that you do. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks so much, Lisa, for that wonderful presentation. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming. We do have another talk next week, and please check the DeFord website, and we'll see you next time. This recording will be posted on the DeFord website, and we'd appreciate it if you would share it with your social networks. So we will see you next time.
Great, thanks everyone. And feel free to email me with the questions that I missed. I'm just scrolling through a few here about accessing the pop-up. So it'll be a full year before, but it'll be traveling. So we don't have a Texas site yet, but I don't see why we can't. and our resources are available all over the world, all the online resources and interactives and virtual fields that I shared. So